This video brought to you by jadedpainting.com. If you need your miniatures painted to a tabletop standard, check out jadedpainting.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to my painting tutorial. My name is Jay and I'll be continuing this painting tutorial series on this Chaos Warpsmith, one of the new awesome HQs for the new Chaos Space Marine Codex. So after the shading was dry from the previous step, I gave all of the red areas a highlight with Evil Sun's Scarlet, the first layer color in the red group associated with Mephiston Red. And as you can see, I'm basically just focusing on the outermost edges of all these red areas. I'm basically just doing an edge highlight or an overbrush over the areas, just focusing on whatever's exposed and leaving the recesses and the more shaded areas the really nice Caribou Crimson shading. I then started all the yellow areas on the model, which was also just some of the smooth wiring with Averland Sunset, the base color for yellow from the Citadel range. I just chose selective wires, usually the large smooth ones, and decided to paint them yellow. Averland Sunset did an okay job of going over the areas with a single coat, but I still recommend doing probably two with this particular paint color. That way you get a nice true yellow color on all these areas. I then highlighted them all with Aerial Yellow. There's really no point in shading them since they don't have any recesses in them, and it's not particularly easy to shade yellow unless you have a yellow shading. And as with before, I just did a quick edge highlight of those areas. I then started on the blacks on the model with Gray Liner, a really nice product from Reaper. If you don't have Gray Liner, I recommend using just Abaddon Black from Games Workshop. What I really love about Gray Liner is that it appears black in the shades, but actually will appear very dark matte gray when hit by any light source. So it really provides some nice contrast that Abaddon Black wouldn't normally provide. And so I painted his chest plate, the parts on his axe, the metal loincloth on him, his belt, and I even painted wire on the wiring. I painted some stripes to make just a little bit of a pattern on the wiring. I also choose some more of the coiled wiring on his back and decided to paint that Gray Liner as well. And finally, I also painted the chimneys, as you can see here, Gray Liner, which they will be later going on with more golds. Gray Liner is a particularly thin color, but it does tend to give good coverage with a single coat. But I do recommend just making sure you have a nice, even coverage of this color before proceeding to any shading. And as you can see here, I'm painting his backpack, just the center part of it with Gray Liner, as well as the backs of the chimneys, which will be the surrounding parts of the gold ghosts. What I really love about this new model is the awesome detail on such areas as the chimneys with the ghosts on the chimneys and some of this amazing detail on the back. And as you can see here, I'm just painting very thin lines of Gray Liner over the reds to give it a nice pattern. I recommend just doing some slow, thin brush strokes and building them up a little bit at a time until you get to the desired thickness of stripes that you'd like. For the yellow wiring, I decided to paint them at about a 45-degree angle just to provide some variation. When the base coat was dry, I gave all the Gray Liner areas a Nuln Oil shading, which will still keep the dark gray, but it'll end up just darkening the recesses and the edges, or anything that's bordering an edge, a little bit more, just to give it a little bit more darkness and shading and keep the nice dark gray on the raised areas. And luckily, once again, this was a very quick step, because shading tends to be a relatively quick step comparing to the base coats. Another thing that's up to you is whether or not you want to water down your shading. For this one, I decided not to water down my non-oil at all, because I really wanted to darken those recesses. But if you want to provide a little bit less contrast, feel free to do a 1-to-1 mix of non-oil and water. And then I decided to do a very thin edge highlight on all these black areas with ADMINISTRATUM gray. And the nice gray will provide a really nice contrast along the edges and make them really stand out and pop compared to the dark gray on the other parts of the model. Just with the step, remember to take your time and to slowly drag your brush along the very edges that you want to stand out. As you can see, I also decided to use an overbrush technique on the handles and the front wiring just to make them pop a little bit more. And with this step near completion, we can turn our attention to focusing on the gold areas of the model and finishing up the rest.